Hello everybody and welcome back to Middle-earth. This is Count MR VHS with another video update for Wainriders, the submod based on 4th Age Total War that takes the action back into the 3rd Age. The 19th century of the 3rd Age saw the invasion of the Wainriders out of the east and a lot of other conflicts and interesting events happening around Middle-earth at the same time. In this video, we're looking at one of several Dwarven factions that will appear and be playable in the Wainriders. These are Durin's folk, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, the Longbeards. They will be an interesting faction, limited initially to just the settlement of Khazad-dûm. They will have to probably fight north into the Misty Mountains, Grey Mountains, towards Mount Gundabad, and come into conflict with all other types of factions. So here, we're looking at the bodyguard for this particular faction, Durin's Guard. And many of these units will be familiar to you if you have played the 4th Age Total War as the Dwarves, but Weba84 has done some retextures and remodels for some of these units, so I wanted to give you a peek at that. You can see that this version of Durin's Guard is sporting these very nice blue capes, very nice gold and reds throughout the unit as well. Partly this is to indicate the fact that the dwarves of Khazad-dûm at this point in the 3rd Age are still riding fairly high. This is before they have been exiled from that kingdom and forced to found Erebor as a separate kingdom. So the dwarves here are, we imagine, a bit more proud, a bit more independent in some ways, and they're going to wear that on their sleeves or armor as the case may be. Durin's Guard is going to be a very tough unit for you, just as it is in the 4th Age, with battle axes and excellent armor. And in this case, the name of the unit is fairly literal, as they are actually defending a King Durin this time around, as well as his other relatives. Further in the back here, we have Dwarven Warhammers. This is a two-handed Warhammer unit, of course, with the armor-piercing ability on this weapon, which will allow them to be very good against certain matchups, especially bodyguard-type units and any heavily armed troops. They lack a shield, and they're not as well defended as some of your other Dwarven units, so you may want to keep them back like I have here from the rest of the fighting and just use them to flank and try to choose the best targets for them. They've been given some maroon colors here, a bit of red, gold, and blue as well. Over here, also in the back, I've placed a couple units of Dwarven axes. These are a Tier 1 unit for the dwarves. They are sort of your basic Dwarven unit, just a typical melee type with axe and shield. The shield this time around has been touched up a bit, and the Dwarven clothes and armor, I believe, have been given a bit of a nice retexture also. Right in front of them, we have Dwarven Shield Breakers. Another very tough unit. This is one of your higher tier defensively minded troops with swords as well as these very large shields. This unit can perform the Tortoise or Testudo, as it was called in Vanilla Rome. So that will enable them to approach entrenched enemies that are maybe using ranged attacks against them. And in front of them, a unit that I always like to have on the front line is these Dwarven Axe Throwers. They, well, the name pretty much says it all. They throw axes, they use axes in melee, and so they've got some great versatility. Right next to them here, we've got these Dwarven Ballistas, which, because they do not arc, the missiles are kind of tricky to work with. So you want them on the front line or on the flanks potentially, but you don't want your guys to get in front of them while they're firing. But they do have very good range, can impale several men, so it's a nice addition to your forces, but you want to protect them. And to do that, I've brought a unit of Guards of Khazad-dûm, a couple of units actually. This is essentially the Long Axes unit from the 4th Age, but they've also been given some touches here, some more colors and a bit of gold here and there to, again, indicate the status of this faction at this point in the 3rd Age. So this is going to be a very strong, defensible unit, as you may imagine, very effective against cavalry and defensive in nature, but given that they lack shields, there is a bit of vulnerability to some ranged weapons here, and you will want to watch out when they're fighting units that can be effective against armor, because they will take losses against those. Also on the front lines, we have a couple of units of Dwarven Bows. It's always nice to have a bit of ranged power that's not just siege weapons, and these guys are going to be very effective in those archer duels that sometimes break out at the beginning of a fight. They will be able to hold their ground very well, very defensible units. And just next to them, some Dwarven Siege Ballistas. Always good to have a unit or two of those. But what's interesting about the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm in a lot of ways is not only what you're seeing here, but what you don't see. If you've played the 4th Age Total War as the Dwarves, you know that in that mod you had to use hirelings. These are mannish allies of the Dwarves who would allow you to expand and train troops in mannish settlements once you got outside of your own homelands. Durin's folk, we imagine as a fairly conservative, very insular faction, and given their pride, thinking that it's fairly unlikely that they're going to be training men to fight for them. But one of the things that we will be able to do to make up for that lack of versatility is to make use of, there we go, taking out the enemy general, always nice, is to make use of a great feature that's available in the Alexander EXE, which again, this is what we are using for Wainriders, the Alexander Total War EXE, and that is factional mercenaries, so faction-specific mercenaries. This means that just about any faction we have in the submod can have its own unique mercenaries depending on where we want these to appear. So you might be traveling through the Anduin Vales, there might be certain mercenaries that are appropriate for the dwarves, but if you're playing as Angmar, let's say, you might find different mercenaries that are appropriate for you when you're fighting or traveling in a particular spot. So that will allow us to spring a few surprises on you as development continues. But here we're looking at just the basic kind of roster here, and I've pitted them against a faction with some orcs and wild men and potential cultists to just sort of show that the type of thing that they, I would guess, are likely to be fighting in the campaign. Given that the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm are going to have some victory conditions in the north, they're likely to run into trouble with Angmar, and that is a faction that's going to be able to have orcs and hillmen and cultic adherents to the Witch King and so on. So this is a fairly reasonable matchup of what you might be expected to find in your various combats. But of course, who knows where you're going to take the Durin's folk in the course of your campaign. So here we're doing very well with these Guards of Khazad-dûm holding out against the Orc Blades, keeping them off of the siege ballistas so that we can continue to batter the enemy ranged units that are just annoyingly out of our reach. Cavalry is not much of a problem for us at all. We've got these Guards of Khazad-dûm ready to run into those Shadow Riders, and we've also got Durin's Guard in here to help cut them down when they do get caught, as well as some archers still firing in the back there. The crew for the ballistas, you may notice I did end up moving. That's one thing that I've found is with the ballistas, it's rare that you can keep firing them for the entire battle because your own troops get in the way. So at that point, you can use them as kind of a flanking unit. Maybe they can chase down some routers or help defend the crew of your siege ballistas, which you do want to keep pounding away at the enemy position while you've got them protected, because they do have the ability to arc in flight over your own troops, as long as you're careful. So at this point, we're seeing some routing. We're getting the enemy running, which is always a good thing, and it's not going to be too long before we call this a battle. But that's basically what I wanted to bring for you today, a quick look at Durin's folk. Again, this is not the only Dwarven faction you're going to see in Wainriders, and we will take a look at those as the development of the mod continues. Until then, keep an eye out on this channel, but also at the TotalWarCenter.net forums for the 4th Age. We have several threads there that go into more detail about what you're seeing in this video. And from there, you can also check in with our Discord server for the 4th Age, which has a section devoted to the Wainriders. Leave any questions or comments in the comment section below, and thank you very much for joining me. Bye-bye, everybody.